for this. Hello everyone and welcome to this episode of Raising Remarkable Teenagers. I am so excited as always. As you can see, I've got a brilliant guest here, and those of us who are listening on the podcast, I have Chris McBrien here. He is an expert, and you're gonna hear, he doesn't need much introduction because I believe what he's going to be saying will tell it all, really. But he's an educator, he's a career coach, he's a coach, yeah? And he's worked in the education sector for over 35 years. So we've got some expertise here, and I suggest, including myself, I'm gonna be all ears because I think, and specifically today, I asked Chris to talk about parenting girls, parenting daughters, and also on the other side, parenting boys, parenting sons, because we all know there's a bit of difference, apart from just them being teenagers, especially in our circles, apart from them being that, there's a bit of difference in both of them. So we are all in luck today. Those of us that have girls, we are in luck. Those of us that have boys, we are in luck. I give it up to you, Chris. Welcome.
Well, good morning. It's nice to be here with you. And I appreciate really, I think the two questions. I've spent a whole life doing this and really have done it since I was quite young. My family owned a summer camp where I grew up, and that's really what kind of started my career. So I've dealt with both. Clearly, I've coached a lot of boys and taught a lot of boys. And importantly, clearly have done the same with girls, but in my case, I have a 17-year-old daughter. So I have my own perspective on that as well. And I think for me, what's really important is to recognize just how different they are. Mm-hmm. And how approaching them both as an educator, but also I think as a parent. So I'm going to try to talk as a parent here, but because I've got so much experience in education, that's most likely going to jump into the picture here. But for me, in terms of daughters and girls. Mm-hmm. As a parent, as a father, as a man, mm-hmm. Okay, there are probably 6 or 7 things that I think really kind of help young women to identify themselves as being powerful figures, in the world. So, number one, I think it's a responsibility of fathers and dads to make sure that they know that their daughters can, that they make sure that they tell their daughters that their daughters can succeed no matter what. This is not they're not following anybody. The guys aren't any better. They can do whatever they want to do. And I think it's important also to make a distinguishing statement about the word father and dad. And this is where it comes in. Yeah. Any man can be a father.
That's right.
Not every father is a dad.
All right. Tell us more.
So physically, we can all potentially help create a daughter, which means you are a father. Yeah. But there are a lot of fathers who are not involved, who are not there to empower their children. They're just the birth father, but they don't take care of the responsibility that comes with the territory of being a dad, of being an example, of being a teacher, of being a hugger, of being, this is wrong, this is right, this is how you treat women, et cetera, et cetera. So there's a big difference there. I read that one years ago and it always stuck with me. So I think it's important that we do that because basically, look, if there's there's one thing I can do as the father of a daughter, yeah, and to empower her is to show them how I treat women. all right? How I treat their mother,
Yes.
how I make a note of, women's contributions to the world. So simple things, even like looking, I'll let you answer this question maybe, but I think if you look around the world right now,
Yeah.
and look where the true great world leaders are, that if you take a really good look, you're going to find that the most powerful leaders, and this is as a man, that you're going to see in the world right now, for me, I'm thinking of two women, and there are clearly others, and I'll let you figure out who the women are, but hands down, there are several who really paint such a beautiful picture for what somebody can become as a woman in a role of leadership.
Absolutely.
Because we are, meaning me as a man, and men are what helps them to identify their female identity and the things that they're going to come to expect from us.
That's right.
So hugs, birthdays, Mother's Days. As a good example, I'm not with my daughter's mother, but nothing changes, because if it's Mother's Day, she gets flowers. If it's her birthday, we go out for lunch or dinner together. She gets flowers. It's always recognizing my daughter's mother, because then I'm setting the example for her.
Wow.
So,
that is amazing.
yeah, I think that's the number one. That's for me the biggest. So compared to the rest, without that, I wouldn't be doing it in my eyes.
Wow. So what you're saying here is, what I can hear from you is that you're setting an example, you're setting a standard for your young person to recognize the worth in women by how you treat her birth mother and other women.
Absolutely.
That is profound. And
That's
even
the
more
whole.
profound is the fact that you actually are not in the relationship anymore, but that doesn't stop or doesn't reduce the worth that she is, the mother of your young person is. This is going to be a big one for, I'm sure I can already see some of my, especially female listeners, saying, I wish this would happen to me. I wish this would happen to me. And obviously, there's a lot of learning to be done. There's a lot of learning to be done. There's a lot of mind shifts to be done about, especially when people separate, how they continue to treat the other person, especially when we have kids with them, because unknowingly, in the punishing the other person, you are teaching your child, especially our young people, our teenagers, we are teaching them to follow suit, or we are teaching them that that's what to expect, right? That's what you expect. As long as you're not in a relationship with someone, you don't need to care for them, or you don't need to treat them right. But what I hear you saying is, your daughter now can expect to be treated well by any person, whether they are in relationship with them or not, because of the example that you have set. That is absolutely beautiful, and I'm really proud of how you've done it. And I don't hear many such examples, yeah. But hopefully, this will inspire many men to follow suit, because you don't lose face for doing that.
No, well, this is the message, though, I think, and I actually, a little while ago on her mother's birthday, I went live with this very issue.
Wow.
Because there are so many issues. This is really almost another whole topic that you could talk about in terms of how you treat people that are the parent, the mother of your child, somebody who obviously you loved intensely, And for whatever reason, it didn't work out, but you still have a responsibility as a man, as a father, no matter what the circumstances. I mean, look, if there's clearly incarceration or a drug problem or alcohol or things like that that you can't control, but most things that are around your children, you've got to have a say in. And no matter what's happened between the parents, what I'm doing by setting that kind of example for my daughter is I'm empowering her so that when she goes to look for a partner, in any way, she will have an example of the kind of person that she's going to want to be looking for in a partner who has similar values.
Absolutely.
So yeah, I mean, that's really critical for me. So I believe in, sometimes with my daughter, because we're very close, I can go places that a lot of dads don't get to go. So I've actually had conversations with my 17-year-old about guys, and that's normally a don't go there as a dad, let that be mom. But I think it's important that if you can, as a dad, to have that kind of situation where the daughter feels that she can talk to you if she needs to about those things, or simply saying something that alludes to something that's going on in her life, and she's probably going to go, how do you know about that? You're not supposed to know stuff like that, right? You're prying in my business. I'm like, I'm not prying in your business. I'm your dad, and I can see things. I listen, I observe, and here's what I say. And all of a sudden you get into a conversation and your heart is warmed by all of a sudden how she opens up to you. So, that way, and in that way, and it's kind of moving on to another point, because it's introducing them to the power of independence.
Yes.
Independence is a very powerful thing, all right? And as children grow older, and this is hard for fathers with their daughters. I mean, it's clearly for sons as well, but with their daughters, daddy's little girl isn't going to be around forever. You want them to be because of how much fun it is, but I think you have to go and grow with the flow as the dad of a daughter and enjoy the journey. I think I'll share a little story here about daughters. My cousin is one of 4 daughters.
Yeah.
And she has 2 daughters and a son, and she is the head of a school in Brooklyn, New York. And and I talk with her periodically because family and teenage daughters and yada yada, and she's like, Chris, I'm going to tell you one simple thing about fathers with their children, but especially fathers with their daughters. And she's like, listen, the boys, easy. The girls, a whole nother story, and no parent will come out unscathed by the challenge of raising the daughter simply because of who they are. Not right or wrong, just the fact that they are a daughter, and the physical changes, the hormones, all of these things that are part of that journey. Yeah. And she's like, you will not come out unscathed. So it was a good tip for me, So, but I always go back to being accepting of things, when it's time to listen, you listen. And I just try to listen a lot and be there when she wants me to be there, because there's that time when she could sit in my hand, and it was perfect. And now she can't do that anymore. So that independence, I think, in letting them know that it's okay to fail, that's a big one for both. Okay. But society puts so much pressure, additional pressure on women unfairly, simply because of the way they are portrayed and introduced in the public eye. And this is why I say encouraging them to be independent, and importantly, I think to develop critical thinking.
Yeah.
So helping them by encouraging them and valuing everything they say, you know, what their opinions are, what their thoughts are. So as they're growing, you know, through preteens and tweeners and teenagers, so that as they keep growing, you keep empowering them, you keep helping them to build that independence by encouraging critical thinking, etc. And then if you can talk with them about boys, wow, as a father, man, that's a huge factor because it's not the norm. Normally, you know, most girls, some do, but most girls talk about boys with mom.
Yeah.
If they do.
Yeah. So just on that independence and obviously in your position, having worked with probably many parents, many teenagers, what would you say is sort of the biggest strain between parent-teen relationship? In whatever, what is it that you hear often? This like.
Yeah, no, I mean, in terms of, yeah, look, for me, it's not just teenagers. I think it's everybody. Okay. So for me, communication is the key factor here.
Right.
How you choose to communicate with different peoples, with different genders of different ages, is very important. And learning what words to use and not to use, learning to stay away from the red buttons. So the red buttons are very different for young girls than they are from young boys, just like they are for adult women and adult men. But there's certain things you definitely want to stay away from, and work on the things you know you can. I mean, you know, as parents, look, we all have our own unique strengths as a parent, whether we choose to use them is another story. So, but each of us has a unique ability, but we all have the ability to communicate. And number one, for me, listening, being there. No, not telling them, listening to their feelings so they feel heard.
So does that come from the young people saying that we don't listen, or is it the parents that say, I wish, do the parents actually come to you and say, gosh, I wish I could listen more? How does it
Well,
come
a lot
out?
of times it's more that they're saying, I wish I could communicate. I wish I could talk with my kid a little bit better. So most of the time it's about wishing that the door was actually open. If the door is open, you have a whole nother set of circumstances that you deal with because everything's being thrown at you. If the door hasn't been opened because you've failed, because you haven't yet succeeded is a better way of saying it. And then you take the failure out of it because you haven't succeeded in getting to that kind of place where you feel really good about being able to sit down and just kind of shoot the breeze with your kid and have a great conversation without it being anything, do your chores. Why aren't you doing this? Why aren't you doing better at that? And just being and enjoying the moment, enjoying the journey with your kid.
Oh wow, that's so interesting. You know, that's something I hear with I mean the parents say, I wish they could open up for me to communicate. And then the kids say, I wish parents would listen. And sometimes, like you said, we are so caught up in the telling, and no one wants to be told and talked to all the time. And I think I believe listening makes every one of us feel important, even more so the young people. Yeah.
Absolutely. You know, when you listen closely to people, you're empowering them because they're feeling really heard and they're feeling that what they have to say is important. So it's like somebody, one of the age-old statements just about, being a leader. If you want to be a great leader, be the best listener in the room.
Absolutely. And it's a good thing that you brought that up. I was trying not to say it because I bang on a lot about parents being leaders. And some of them, it's hard for them to actually adopt that feeling, to embody the fact that we are actually leaders, but that's what we are. We are leaders, and we have to decide what kind of a leader you are. You're a leader in position, but then how effective of a leader are you? Because you're already in position. So make yourself a leader worth following, a leader who's influential, yeah, and a leader who can be trusted. Because think about all the qualities of transformational leaders and great leaders. And that's what we need to adopt as parents so that we can influence our young people. Because without influence, we just have the position. We just have the position, but no one is actually following. No one is listening to us. No one is modeling us because there is nothing of us to be modeled.
Yeah, you have to lead by example.
Absolutely.
And that's 100%. So the leader that spends all the time trying to be at the front and telling people, do this, do this, do this, do this, do this, do this, that person's going to fail. That's not a leader. That's not a leader. That's a boss. That's a boss.
It's pointing. You're pointing, but a leader needs to be a guide where I walk with you down this road, right? I may just be a few steps ahead of you, but I'm walking the same road with you.
Sure.
Wow.
Now, and I will say there's actually one other thing that just came up for me actually in regards to empowering your daughters. And this is actually, this may be the biggest one.
Go on, let's hear it.
Self-care. Yeah, I think when you can empower, we're talking about daughters here, but when you can empower your daughters to really take care of themselves emotionally, physically, spiritually, when you can do those three things, it will empower your daughters in such a way that their self-image that they have of themselves, wiping away the physical component because of our societies, but the self-image that they have of themselves in here is what is empowered by them. And when you teach young people, so my daughter is very fortunate because I'm a former college basketball coach and athletic director, semi-professional footballer, and still train like crazy. And my daughter's mother is a high-end yogini. So she's got two parents who have stressed the importance of self-care in all three areas. And you see it in her as she's been empowered by it. So self-care, that's true for everybody. Okay. But again, we're talking about, teenagers, but young ladies face all kinds of things very differently out in the social world because of image and clothes and makeup and how you're supposed to look and how you're supposed to use it. So difficult.
So what I'm hearing you say is actually modeling. Again, it is modeling because as a psychologist, I, as well as an educator, I speak to parents and I say to them, you can tell, you can talk, but they are going to hear you more to embody what you embody, because it's in modeling that they catch. Yeah, they catch these behaviors. For example, someone said to me, behavior is caught, not taught. So what you're saying about self-care, your daughter has grown around people who look after themselves, who look after their bodies, people who people who are, people who look after their mind, because as you said, the mother is Elohim, that whole connection, that wholesome body, therefore, it's very unlikely that the flimsy, fickle world is going to influence. She can look, she will see, but she's more likely to understand and decipher. I think this looks fake, because she knows what being whole is, right?
Well,
So,
I tell you, I
mhm.
love the word. I love the word that you use, though. So, because if somebody asks me about my daughter, um, the first thing I tell them is that she's a very wholesome young lady. So the word wholesome is it's a very attractive word. So as a man, if somebody says, I'm going to introduce you to an extremely wholesome woman,
Oh, wow,
I'm going to be very interested in that.
that's
Okay.
right.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's right, because their mind, their body, their relationship, they are looking for something beyond what and I can almost say, obviously I don't know her, but from what I'm hearing and from other young people that I've worked with who are wholesome, they are able to tell when things are not okay or when things are not right. Yeah. So they, and then they're able to tell, oh, this is cute.
It's a little while ago.
I can imagine. So that's a really, and it's good for parents out here to hear that this is possible. It is possible for us to bring up wholesome kids, no matter what is going on around the world. In fact, in research, we find that parents, listen to this, and I know all of my listeners know this because I've said it many times. Parents still remain the most influential part in their kids' life. No matter what else is going, they still remain, because there is a heart connection. So we still have that power to influence. So, and I think it's time we used it. We used it to our advantage and to the advantage of our own kids.
Absolutely. And we all possess the ability to do it, but you have to work at it. So you have to, as a parent, you have to prepare. You have to spend some time with yourself thinking about how you want to be able to communicate with your kids. And as a father, clearly I've got a daughter, so you need to spend time with yourself as the journey changes. Think about, okay, what's working, what's not working.
Mm.
How do I fit in over here? You have to do it. If you're just going to wait for the moment and react on the spot, it's not going to work. You have to know who you want to be as a parent.
Absolutely.
Whether it's a girl or a boy, So I'm one of the dads who actually, and this is a much deeper, so for somebody who's a psychologist or a psychiatrist, they would want to go into this further. But I'm one of the guys actually who was rooting for a daughter.
Mm-hmm.
And that's part of my story, but I would have loved to have had a young boy, to go around and kick the football around with. This would have been great, but I knew that I had something within me to offer as the father, the dad of a daughter. So, and for me, that gives me a lot of meaning
Wow.
in my own personal journey. So yeah. So the daughters, yeah. Hey, for me, hey, I love every minute of it. I mean, I could have had her every day for the rest of my life when she could have sat in my hand. But the beauty of it is seeing, your daughter go from being this little child and watching them grow into a woman and feeling really proud of the role, even even if they don't think, right, that you've done all that much, because at certain ages they go, you haven't done that. So I give you an example. I told my daughter I was going to be on this podcast.
Yeah.
And she said, "Oh, great. What are you going to talk about?" And I said, "Well, I'm going to talk about how fathers can empower their daughters." And she was like, "What? You've never empowered me in anything." And of course, and I looked at her and I said, "That's okay. That's fine. But this is a normal teenage daughter reaction saying, you don't know what you're talking about."
I know. I know.
So I just was like, okay. And later on, down the road, she'll come back to me and go, so you have to trust. That's why I say you have to trust the process.
Absolutely.
As the father of a daughter.
You have to trust the process, and you have to know it's like the air. I tell people some of these things, we do them on a daily basis. It's like breathing. You don't know, sometimes we don't realize the importance until it's taken away from us.
Correct.
If the air was snatched, we take it for granted because it's there, you breathe in, you breathe out. You breathe in, you breathe out. You've never had to, hardly put any effort until, I have been fortunate. I haven't been in a situation where I was denied of bread, but I've spoken to people who have had difficulty breathing, and they've had to be put in and the appreciation, that they come back with a renewed appreciation, and that's what I say to parents, that let's never stop doing good. Let's do it. Whether they say thank you or I appreciate, whether they notice it or not, our job is to be like the sun, to come out every day and shine. Come out every day and shine. Whether people come out and enjoy with the sun, it doesn't care. It comes back again tomorrow and shines. It gives life to everything. So many of us, just talking about that, even today, I haven't said, oh, thank you, sunshine. I haven't. But that's not going to stop the sunshine from coming out tomorrow. It's not going to stop it.
That's right.
So that's the spirit we should adopt as parents. Never stop doing good, giving it, because we are human beings, unlike the plants and everything. We are human beings, and the kids will look back and say, wow, look at all this. I didn't notice that this was happening, but this was all happening. Yeah, and whether they ever say it or not, it doesn't matter.
No. Look, my uncle, who's been dead many, many, many years, he said years ago, and it's kind of a strange twist of words here. He said, being a parent is a magnificent problem. So the key word there is magnificent, because he's saying how great it is. But you have to really want to grow with it as a parent and understand the different stages, that girls have, that boys have. So, and I've always loved it. When I read that in his journal one time, it's like, yeah, boy, that makes a lot of sense to me. Because you do run into challenges, problems, challenges, whatever. Normal, because that's what life is. Life is full of challenges. That's every day we face a challenge.
Absolutely. So in parenting, for example, in parenting your girl, or with encounters with other parents, what when they speak to you, what do they tell you that if this happened in my relationship with my young person, this would make me so happy, or this would make me feel fulfilled, or this would be like the best day of my life if this happened? What is the one thing that they say,
Wow. That's a good question. I'm not, and I'm never one to really respond to those one things, because it's almost invariably a list of things.
Yeah.
But for me, I'll liken it to a comment made by another parent to my father years ago. So my father and I had an incredibly powerful bond. My mother died when I was 8 months old. So, and my dad and I went on this incredible journey. And as a result of that, the bond that we had was something that was very powerful. And it was his father had died when he was 10, and he was determined that he was going to be the son for me that he wished he had had with his own father, who died when he was so young. So the commitment that he had to me created a situation where we could talk about anything at any time, anywhere, any place. If I looked to the side of the field, he was always standing there watching me, supporting me. And his business partner years ago went to him, who also had a son, same age as me, same class. And he looked at my dad and he said, Hugh, I wish I had the kind of relationship with Russell that you have with Christopher.
Wow.
And it simply was because of him being somebody who was there to listen. He didn't beat around the bush. He was very direct with me, man of few words. And if I did something wrong, he was the kind of guy that would, so this is, to the other part of this, empowering boys in a way, but he would go to me and say, if I tripped up a little bit, he would look at me and say, so are you feeling proud of yourself right now? And and then he would keep walking, leaving me to ponder, which is actually a really important thing about boys, but leaving me to ponder what I had done, and all of a sudden going, yeah. So he left me to figure it out on my own without scolding me, without showing any anger, just saying, feeling pretty proud of yourself now, huh? Right?
So he left you to be your judge of yourself, to be your own, to reflect. He gave you that more. He must have strengthened your mental faculties, because you're thinking in terms of, oh, I've done this, I've done this, I've done this, and now the question is, am I proud of it? And and you get that moment to actually reflect and judge yourself and correct yourself. How empowering is that? That's super empowering.
Yeah, and it was a good compliment, because he remarried to a woman, to my mom, right? Who was very, very much the more strict person, and the person who was more likely to try to be a disciplinarian, even though they didn't have to deal with that very much. But she had that little heritage that she had in her own family. So she was a perfect complement. I was the lucky guy who had, lost my mom when I was really young, and then lost my mother, and then my dad remarried, and the woman was the greatest mom anybody could ever have. So, and of course they both were the ones who clearly set examples for me on how to treat other people, and the kind of example that you're setting for people. So, and a lot of what we're talking about, there are things, and you have to tell me if we've got time. I've got, stuff to talk about boys as well.
Yeah, that's what I was about to say. We need to move on talking about
well,
boys.
that's fine, but it's interesting, because a lot of these things, and we'll just shift into the boy part of this, but a lot of these things, look, they're all true for boys and girls. It's just learning how to work with them differently for the two groups. But here's what I found out. I think this is really important. So these are actually, I'm just going to give you these statistics, because this is going to set up the whole point of understanding boys.
Right. I was feeling tempted to write it down, but I don't want to miss anything. What I'll do is I'll listen in, because I want to get the whole grasp the whole load of it, and then I'll have to re-listen again and write it down, because I find myself writing notes but I think I'm just gonna have to re-listen to this and watch it.
And these are actually very fascinating, because this sets up, I think, a very good picture of the troubles and the challenges and the obstacles that we face with boys. So follow me here. 90% of discipline problems are with boys. 70% of D's and F's of the grades in schools are boys.
Do you know what, Chris? I know I said I wasn't going to write that down, but allow me to write because I'm already feeling boggled by the whole thing.
No, and yeah, that's fine. Write them down, you know, and look, and I'm imagining that most of these numbers are related to the United States, but it doesn't matter because if you
cross over.
Yeah, the numbers cross over. So, but they give you the example. So you've got 90% of the discipline problems, 70% of D's and F's in school, less than 40% of A's and B's, 80% of incarcerated youth are boys, a disproportionate number of boys are on ADHD medicines. Boys 10 to 18 are 4 times more likely to commit suicide, and boys 18 to 24 are 6 times more likely to commit suicide.
Wow.
So when you look at those factors alone, it gives you a whole lot to sit down and go, wow. So, and this is coming from a guy who, as I said, you know, earlier, you know, it came from a friend of mine who I interviewed coming out of university 30 years ago, this fall, and he's now the director of the National Center for the Development of Boys in the United States. Wow. So this is right down his alley, and he speaks all over the country on these issues. Very powerful guy. So just those numbers, I think it leaves you no choice but to do this and go, wow.
Jide, I'm saying wow because I said I was going to write. I didn't even end up writing because I'm just it's just something. So
yeah, you know, and that clearly also says that it's not just the boys' issues, because clearly that means educators and parents are failing the boys. So just as I was talking about the importance of the father, the dad, empowering their daughters by showing them how you're treating women, right? And how you are empowering women and young ladies. Clearly the same is true for boys. And it's showing here that by numbers of for young boys, that power of parenting, clearly in my case as a father, and the challenges that we face with boys.
Wow, do you know what, Chris? I think we will have to talk about the boy topic on another day as just its own, because I haven't got boys myself, but some of my favorite young people that I work with are boys, because I love their friskiness, I love their risk taking, I love all that, and they just give me a different way of thinking. And way of looking at them. And I know most of my parents, listeners, and my friends have got boys, if not one of each. So I'm thinking, I think we should have a session where we actually focus on boys. In fact, 2 weeks ago, I did an interview, and there was a lot of parents were asking, really, we need to focus on the boys. We need to talk about these boys, the boys' statistics. Because we are hearing a lot about girls and how to empower them. But what's the point of empowering one side of the population and then the other one?
It's a two-way
Yeah.
street.
So
It's a two-way street, and that's and I agree with you. I mean, I think it's a good idea.
I think we need to do that for boys, and oh my goodness, and this one, the next one, I'm just gonna have to publicize, guys. Just go and tell everyone we're gonna have a session on just parenting boys, because I mean, we hear all these scary statistics about our boys, but there isn't much advice to parents about how to handle this. And one thing, in fact, yesterday I was in a panel where I was talking to young people, just the youths, and one of the boys said something that really struck me. He said that, you see, we may not talk much, even when we don't fight, because we are afraid of our parents. There's a lot of anger, there's a lot of aggression going in within us. And it was interesting because I thought it's girls that keep these emotions pent up. But that boy said, that's the reason I don't want to see my father ever. I don't want to see him. And we are talking about a young person who's not even 20 years old. The other one said, I knew, do you know what he said? He said, I knew as soon as I got to 15, I would put myself up to the social care because I didn't want to stay at home anymore. And I was just listening to them, and I asked, so why did you not have, did you not tell your parents what was going through your mind? Said, but they wouldn't listen. I just wanted to go. So, and that was just, and the other boy said that the parents thought because he was very hyper, and they said that he had ADHD or learning problems, but because of his background, they didn't want him to be labeled as such, so they denied him the help that could have been, because they took the problem. They didn't want the shame of having a child who. So when I listened to I was almost in tears. You know, actually, I was so touched. I said, I think we are failing the boys. I think we are failing the boys.
Well, I can tell you that my friend Troy Kemp would be telling you that this has been going on for a very long time. But what you can't do, I think, in regards to this, and I agree with you, man. I'd love to come back and do it again with you, where we only talk about boys, because to try to do both of them in 30 minutes or whatever, even more at this point, you're just barely scraping the surface. And clearly, if you look at the numbers, and I would repeat those the next time you look at numbers and hear numbers like that, clearly this is where we have failed. And it's one of the reasons why there are so many social issues and challenges related to boys, related to men, related to how they act in society, related to so many things. And as simple as crying, as a good example, because we live in a culture, in so many cultures, where people look at that as a sign of weakness for a man if they cry. And that's probably the worst thing you can do to anybody, because all it is a release.
Absolutely.
And
denying them the ability to express themselves. It's in itself.
That's a sign of strength. It's exactly the opposite of how it's perceived culturally. That it's a sign of weakness if you show that. And I'm like, boy, I got news for you then. If that's true, I'm the strongest, weakest man there that I know, man. Because that's how you let go of things.
Absolutely. Chris, I'm so grateful for the insights that you've given us. And we are having you back, because I don't think we've had enough of you. We've barely scraped the surface. And I know all of these lovely parents, you know, they love to learn. I know that we all love to learn. We love to find out what's happening. We love to find out how can we improve our relationships with our young people? How can we help our young people not fall down there's so much mental breakdown. How can we prevent them from getting to such a point where they tip? And one of the things you've said is about communication, being a model. And those are ideas that we churn about and we talk about. And the most important thing is that when parents practice this, they work. They work because these are ideas. This is wisdom that is research. This is ancient wisdom, and it's coming from people like you who have been in this space for 35 years and more. So I just can't thank you enough. Have you got your last thoughts for our parents today?
Well, you know what? It's funny. My thoughts for people in general. Do what you love, and what you love will do for you.
Aww, brilliant.
So that's how I try to encourage people to, professionally, find something you love, and it will do it for you if you put your time in. So.
Oh, brilliant. Thank you so much, Chris. And we're definitely arranging another session because we ain't got enough of you yet. Thank you so much.
Look forward to it.
Thank you, everyone. And as always, let us know what you think about this, the feedback. We love to hear your feedback. Just write to us, and it's Angie at Raising Remarkable Teenagers, where we do our best to look all over the world and find strategies for raising highly effective teenagers. All the best today. Bye for now.